place, Korea. The time, today. This hour. Now. On some flaming hill 10,000 miles from home, American boys are fighting and dying. Boys from Portland, Maine, Lawrence, Kansas, Spokane, Washington. The boy who lived next door. The boy you went to high school with. The boy who sat across from you at the breakfast table. But even as life drains from them in great red spurts, a lifeline reaches out to them. A lifeline that begins at an airfield in the States, where the blood of other Americans is loaded onto planes for transport to the fighting front. It's a long lifeline, stretching for endless miles across the Pacific to a blazing battleground almost half a world away. On the shell-scarred Korean shore, helicopters, the brave flying windmills of the front, take over the precious cargo. At forward emergency stations within the very sound of gunfire, the blood is unloaded, made ready for use. A few minutes later, drop by drop, that precious fluid fills the veins of a dying soldier, fans the spark of life in him again. Blood from Prescott, Arizona, Kokomo, Indiana, Bluefield, Virginia, from the thousands of folks back home who have not forgotten this boy, who have given of themselves that he might live. That is Operation Lifeline today. But what about tomorrow? What about the boy who falls wounded tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and the day after that? What if the blood supply runs out? What then? Do they simply die? They will, you know, unless we do something about it. For the blood is running out fast. The reserve is almost exhausted. What are you going to do about it?
Well, cousin, you heard what the man said. What are you going to do about it? The Department of Defense informs us that we need 75,000 pints of blood a week. Are we going to be in serious trouble? 75,000 pints a week. At the present time, we're only receiving 43,000 pints a week. What's the matter with us, anyway? During World War II, the people of these here United States donated 110,000 pints of blood in 1 week to the American Red Cross. You know, maybe we've got the wrong slant on this Korean situation. So it is a police action. Maybe it isn't a declared war. But you try telling that to some mother or dad that has a son over there. Or try telling it to some GI over in Korea with a belly full of shrapnel. A soldier dead in Korea is just as dead as any soldier ever died in any official war. Well, folks, that's the situation. What are we going to do about it? You know, sometimes I get to sitting around ruminating about some of the big, great cities in these United States of ours and get to thinking about what a great job they've done in these blood donor weeks. Then I get to thinking sometimes about some of the big cities that haven't done much about it at all. We got a heap of fine little cities in this country. There's a heap of fine people living in them, too. I want to tell you a story about a couple of towns that did such a grand job in this Red Cross donor drive. They might remind you of Marion, Ohio, or Chico, California, or Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. They're located in the great state of Oklahoma. The names of the town are Pryor and Claremore. Well, these two towns decided on having a donor day. And the folks came out, and they got their shoulders to the wheel, and they put this drive over. You know, Oklahoma's a state that believes that if a thing's worth doing at all, it's worth doing right. That's why they built the Grand River Dam, for instance. They built one of the finest in the country. Just a few miles away is the town of Claremore. It's a quiet little place, yet it's alert and progressive, too. What you might call a typical American town. Its people are the same as folks in your town and in towns all over this country. The kind of folks who raise their kids to be good citizens, go to church on Sundays, and to follow the golden rule. When people think of Claremore, they think of Will Rogers, for this was his hometown. That's the Will Rogers Memorial you see there. Oklahoma's way of telling the world how proud it is of its favorite son. The statue of Will and his horse Soapsud stands on a beautiful hilltop overlooking his old hometown. And on that same hilltop is the simple stone that marks the final resting place of America's great humanitarian. You know, Will would have liked the idea of giving blood. Guess that's why the folks from his hometown rallied around when the idea hit them for their own armed forces blood donor drive. And Will would have been mighty proud of the way everybody pitched in to make it a success. Those who were too young to give blood, like the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, have publicized the drive. And believe me, they did a good job of it. From one end of the town to the other, posters told the people of the need for blood, urged them to do their part. The Navy chief, who started the whole thing there in Oklahoma, went around and talked it up among groups like the 4-H Club and the Future Farmers of America, while other volunteer speakers did the same for other groups. They told how much blood donations are going to reduce casualties in Korea, that the percentage of wounded men who die after reaching advanced surgical hospitals is less than 3 out of every 100. Then the kids went out and helped spread the word and distributed pledge cards. Then on D-Day, Donor Day that is, Claremore staged a parade and the whole town turned out for it. It was a mighty fine parade too, complete with high-stepping majorettes, a band that could really sound off, and all the usual trimmings that go to make up a good parade. But something new had been added. Big black trucks that sort of seemed out of place until you read what was written on the side of them. These bloodmobiles and the Red Cross personnel in charge of them were the real stars of the show. And right behind them rode the men who probably owed their lives to the blood collected by just such bloodmobiles, the wounded veterans of Korea. No one had to tell them how important blood is. Yep, it was a mighty fine parade, and as you watched the tanks go by, you couldn't help but think of the boys who were still over there. The boys who soon might be needing the blood that was being donated today. After the parade, there was a show staged right on Main Street. Some of the best talent in the state had volunteered to entertain the folks and help put the important message across. And while the show was going on, the bloodmobiles were being unloaded and set up. At OMA, that's short for Oklahoma Military Academy, which is located just outside of the town. This fine school had proved itself a good neighbor by offering its field house as headquarters for the blood donations. Early in the day, a line began to form outside the building. Men and women from all walks of life, housewives, students, grandmothers, businessmen, and the bloodmobile unit was all set up and ready for them. A real nice young lady in charge of registering the donors made them feel right at home before turning them over to the Red Cross trained volunteers who started them through the donor line. Those who pledged their blood had followed the one simple rule of not eating heavily of foods having a high-fat content for 4 hours before reporting. Every step from the taking of blood pressure to the collecting of the blood itself is supervised by local volunteer registered nurses and physicians. This cadet, like all donors between the ages of 18 and 21, had to get written consent from his parents before being allowed to donate. His Honor the Mayor showed up along with the chairman of the local donor recruiting to give his blood and help put the town over the top in filling its quota. In the meantime, the folks in Mays County right next door were busy getting ready for their D-Day. Looking out of the plane window as you approach the town of Pryor, you see the big Grand River Dam hydroelectric plant and 2 of their spanking new industrial plants, branches of national companies that have become part of the local scene. And who pitched in to put the drive over? A Navy nurse made a trip from a nearby base to talk to their workers about it. About 10 years ago, Pryor's main street was leveled by one of the worst tornadoes in history. Looking at it now, you wouldn't believe it, would you, huh? Well, that same fighting spirit that brought Pryor back to life now sparked the folks in Mays County to really put Donor Day over the top. Down at the high school gym, headquarters for the blood donation, a committee was busy making ready for the expected crowd. Meanwhile, the familiar big Red Cross bloodmobiles were on their way. When they pulled up to the building the next day, 100 willing hands were there and ready to unload them. It was teamwork like this from all over the community that made the whole thing possible. No red tape, just a bunch of average people with lots of energy and heart working together to get the job done. The way Americans always do when they believe in something. Of course, all this took a little planning. Worthwhile projects just don't happen by themselves any more than parades do. Someone's got to organize them, just as someone's got to organize the details of any good cause. But it's just like rolling off a log once you get it started. All you need to begin with is a handful of folks who'll pick up the reins, and you'll be surprised how the rest of the community will climb aboard. Everyone wanted to help, like the merchants, for instance, who closed up shop for an hour to go and give their blood. And like the workers in nearby plants whose bosses gave them time off, so they too could join the crowd of people lining up at the schoolhouse to give a part of themselves, something that money can't buy, to save the lives of our fighting men. This was the ramrod of the whole affair in Pryor, and he got there early because he had lots of things to do that day. Looks like he kind of enjoys it, doesn't he? That's the wonderful thing about giving your blood. It's such a big thing to do. But it's so easy. Well, when D-Day was over and towns had gone back to the other things like baseball, for instance, the word came through that both communities had not only given as much as the Mobile units could receive in the time allowed, but had signed hundreds of pledge cards to give still more blood as soon as the bloodmobiles could get back there. Well, folks, that's what two small American cities did for the fighting man at the front. What are you going to do? Oh, I know you can't get over to Korea, but you can send your blood over there to help a hurt GI. Hey, see this pin? The Red Cross gives you this button when you donate blood to them. You know, I've worn a heap of buttons in my time. Campaign buttons, lodge buttons, red feathers, poppies, and they're all for a good cause. But I take a great personal pride in this Red Cross button because it means that I've given something. Not money, but blood. My own personal gift to a soldier boy that might have died if I hadn't given this blood. And it's a mighty nice feeling, too, believe me. Well, folks, you know what's needed, so it's up to you to pitch in and get the job done. There's a Red Cross representative near you, and if you'll call him, he'd be proud to have your town have a D-Day, a donor day. And I know that you and your friends and neighbors that are seeing this picture will join in making you have a great success of your D-Day in your town. Remember the Red Cross slogan, you can't transfuse a promise. Give your blood today in Operation Lifeline. Thank you, cousins.